Dave, great to have you on.
Great to
How's
be
it
on.
going?
Good, Brendan. How are you? Thanks for asking me.
No, I'm very well. And as we spoke just a minute ago, when I reached out to you, I fully expected you wouldn't be able to do it. So, I mean, you're very kind and very, very generous to agree to do this with me, someone you don't know who's starting a podcast. So I just want to thank you up front very much for that.
No, listen, it's a pleasure, and I genuinely love talking about myself, so why not?
Excellent, excellent. Well, you need little to no introduction. Obviously, you've had a hugely and continue to have a hugely successful career in radio. Can you tell us how it all began? How did you get into it in the first place?
Yeah, and I realized with a podcast that's about, making career decisions, my path to radio is probably not going to help anybody because I was genuinely picked up off the street and put into the biggest radio show in Dublin. Like, this doesn't happen to people. Okay, so pretty long story, as short as I can make it so your listeners don't fall asleep, is I always wanted to be a musician. It was just all I ever wanted to be. And I tried that conversation with my parents, and they were having none of it. And they were like, look, you need to go and get a degree, and then we'll see what you want to do. And we will, if you go and do well in college, get your degree, get good grades, then we'll talk about supporting you as a penniless musician after that. So I did what every musician does, and I studied business and Russian in Trinity. And I went through that, did very well, came out of it with a job offer in Moscow, turned around to my parents and went, yeah, I'm not going to take that job. I want to go to a jazz school for a year. And they were like, oh, what? I was like, I want to study professional jazz. And they were like, oh, you are so weird. But they were supportive. They promised they would be, and they were. So I did that. By the time that year had nearly finished, I had taken a bank loan and had bought what becomes a home studio. Now, look, you're sitting there now with a laptop and a microphone and a cable. I wish that in 1997 it was that easy. But it wasn't. Computer recording was in its infancy. Home computer recording was prohibitively expensive. So when I say I took out a bank loan, it wasn't, 1,300 quid for a MacBook, 200 quid for a mic, and 200 quid for a mixing desk. I needed a sampler. As one of the 17 things I needed for the studio, needed a sampler. A sampler at that time, a Yamaha A3000, was £4,000. But I needed it. So that was just one element of the studio. So the loan I took out was sizable. I needed to pay that back while pursuing my dreams of being a musician. So I got a job in my local petrol station here in Portmarnock in Dublin. And I worked there for years to pay off my massive studio debt while forging a fledgling career in music. One of the places it took me was LA. I went to LA for a while. My wife was an actress and she wanted to pursue acting. So we ended up going over there. She eventually decided she hated the whole LA life and things. Not the life, but the acting side of that and whole culture. So we said we'd come home, so we decided to come home, and kind of, I suppose, naively coming home on the plane, it dawned on me, I don't know why it only dawned on me then, that having lived with my girlfriend, which she was at the time, in LA for this period of time we lived there, I was going home to my parents' house and she was going home to her parents' house because she was an actress and I was a musician and we didn't have regular income, so renting wasn't really an option. So I kind of in my head had decided in the plane on the way home, I'm going to try and formalize this career I have. I'm going to try and make it into something that gives me, instead of like making a year's salary on one project in February and then not earning anything for 18 months. That's great when you're a kid and you live at home and you don't care and you just want to buy more gear or whatever. But if you want to pay rent and buy groceries and have a car and insurance, all of a sudden it's like, well, hang on, no, I need to try and earn regular income. So I kind of came back with the mentality that I would stay in music, but I would try and formalize it. And I very nearly moved my studio into a multimedia company in Temple Bar and was going to be their in-house music guy. So I would have been on a salary, but still have had the free time and the studio space to do my own thing as well. And then one of the things I did to earn extra money was voiceovers. Now, when I say I did voiceovers, I did one voiceover in my life before I got a phone call, which turned into a radio career. But like, I literally had just sent my demo to every recording studio in Dublin. And somebody walked in to someone they knew in a recording studio and said, have you got any new talent? And they said, oh, there's a guy just sent in a demo. He's kind of funny. He does like, basically my demo was 3 minutes of, it was one conversation with loads of different voices. So impersonations, cartoons, accents, foreign languages, whatever I did. I worked it all into one 3-minute piece, bit of crack. So it stood out, I suppose, from the usual kind of voiceover demos people would have. So literally I got this weird phone call about, you know, can you come and meet me about an audio project, a 12-month audio project? And I was like, what audio projects are 12 months? It's not a voiceover for an ad. Maybe it's localizing a cartoon or something. You know, like there might be I was like, what else could you be doing a voice for 12 months? So I went and met this woman in a cafe in town, we're chatting away. And then these 2 men came in and joined us, and it was good cop, bad cop. One was really ratty and asked me all these weird, like, kind of off the cuff. Like, I'd be in the middle of telling a story like this, and he'd go, who's captain of the Dublin football team? And I'd be like, what? I don't know. I hate GAA. What are you talking about? I don't know. And then the other guy was from New Zealand. He was really nice and friendly, whatever. Then they walked off, and then I said, who are they? She's like, I can't tell you. Then we finished up, and I was like, can you tell me yet? And she was like, no, I'll ring you. So that was a Monday. I got a phone call on the Tuesday to say that had gone really well, whatever that meant, because I still didn't know. She said, can you come back in on Wednesday? I said, I can. I went back into a recording studio on Wednesday inside in town. I just read some scripts. Again, they were kind of nondescript scripts. They weren't ads. They weren't what I now know are radio promos. They were just kind of random sentences that I just read. Then they gave me a mini disc and a microphone, because that's how I used to record things. And I went out and described a few things around Dublin and interviewed a few people, came back, gave them that. And then on the Friday, they brought me into a place called the Malt House, which I didn't know where it was. It was in a place called Grand Canal Quay, which I didn't know where that was, but I eventually found it. Went in, and the same lady met me at the door, brought me up to the 4th floor and introduced me to a chap called Dermot, and then said, you two get on, and I'll be back in 20 minutes. And she shut the door. Like, it was like some kind of grown-up play date. And I started kind of going, hey, man, how are you? And he was like, hey, how's it going? And I said, do you know what this is? And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, like, where are we? And he was like, this is 98 FM. And I was like, the radio station? He's like, yeah. He's like, do you not work in radio? I was like, no, I've never been in a radio station in my life. And I genuinely hadn't. I'd never been inside a radio station. And I was like, nope. And he was like, oh, well, I don't know why you're here then, because I think they're going to give me the breakfast show. But I've been working here for 4 years. I was a newsreader. I did comedy. Like, he was telling me all this, whatever. And I was like, all right, you do comedy and voices and impersonations. He was like, yeah. I was like, he goes, do you? I was like, yeah. Like, I do some stuff as well. And we kind of started, who do you do kind of conversation. And we both said Alan Partridge at the same time, and then both did our Alan Partridge impersonations. And realised, like, literally, as Alan Partridge as it sounds, from that moment, we were best friends. But yeah, that was it. And then literally a month later, history. We were put onto the breakfast show on 98 FM. What 98 FM had decided to do, having sacked the previous breakfast show, was to replace it with fresh talent. And when I say my story doesn't help anybody with a career path, that doesn't tend to happen very often anymore. You can still come in off the street, you know, and get a job in radio, but getting the breakfast show on the biggest commercial radio station in the city is just, it's just not going to happen to someone. I mean, don't forget, at this time, like, there were people working on the 10 to 1 shift, the 1 to 4 shift, the 4 to 7 shift, who were huge names in radio who I didn't know. You know, I'd never heard of these people because I didn't listen to radio. I didn't follow radio. I'd never done a pirate radio station. I'd never, you know, everyone else had a history about radio. They respected the gravity of these names, you know, like Nails Mahoney, you know, Barry Dunn, Robbie Fogarty. I'd never heard of these lads, and I was getting the breakfast show, which is the biggest show on the station. I'm walking in going, "Hi lads, I presume we all start here. Do we? This is the terrible shift to get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and do breakfast." And they're all like, "No." So it was all a learning curve. But as you said, the rest is history. I mean, come August 2022, Dermot and I will have been working together for 20 years.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story as well. I mean, it's such a good luck kind of story as well. But at the same time, you put yourself out there, didn't you? I mean, you actively put yourself out there to be found as well.
That is, you've hit the nail on the head, because I think that phrase, maybe you make your own luck. I don't think that's as accurate a phrase as people think it is, but I think what you do is you make yourself available to luck. In other words, you're ready for luck if and when it happens. Because if I hadn't, lived with my girlfriend in LA and wanted to live with her again, if I hadn't, decided, well, if I need to do that, I need to broaden my mind here. I can't just say, I just want to write pop songs for Britney Spears and I'll do whatever it takes for me to do that. That's all I care about. I'm going to only focus on that. And maybe that's what the guys who end up doing that job, maybe that's the singular focus that they have. But I came home went to LA like this and came home. I'm sorry, for your listeners, I'm making my head really narrow, but came home with a really wide-angled view on it and going, if I can still work in audio, if I can still have time to do what I dream of, what I want to be, but I can get regular income, that has to be a good thing. And I took a 6-month radio contract, and that was 20 years ago. And, here I am now with a career in radio that I never planned on.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And you said at the beginning, right, your passion was music. So how did you reconcile that in your early career? Because I think a lot of people go through that. You have your passion in your teenage years, your early 20s, and then reality hits and you need, you get a degree or whatever, and sometimes your passion goes by the wayside. How did you reconcile it as things went on and it became clear you were going to be very successful on radio and that's where your career was going to be?
Well, I suppose, again, I was fortunate that the job that presented itself to me was a job that was still creative and a job that was still in the audio sphere, like I said. I mean, if I had looked out and gotten, look, I had a business degree. Maybe I could have been a financial, accountant in a radio station. That would have been a very different conversation with myself and a tougher conversation. But I suppose what I initially did was I made sure I had time for both. So while I had kind of formalized my passion into, I spent 5 years working as a musician. I didn't do it for a few weeks and go, I really want to do this, or do it part-time. I was full on into, working really hard, putting in the hours. I mean, effectively what I ended up being was a songwriting producer. So your listeners may or may not know, for example, there's a guy called Max Martin, and when you go to the Songwriting Hall of Fame, it's Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Max Martin. People don't know who this guy is. He's very reclusive, very quiet, very understated, but he's literally written every pop hit in the last 25 years. Max Martin has written it. And even now, he's so diverse. Now, it's still all pop, but, so he would have written Hit Me Baby One More Time for Britney Spears. He would have written I Want It That Way for Backstreet Boys, all those songs. But now, recently, the last Coldplay single, he wrote that with the band. He produced that with the band. He's not just sitting there going, I'm still churning out, bubblegum pop. Whatever. His pop has always been the absolute highest echelon pop. So he was a huge hero for me, and his career was what I wanted to emulate. So, I think I really wanted to be that songwriting music producer. And, excuse me. And when I realized that, well, that's fine, but being him is like being, Cristiano Ronaldo, or being, Rafa Nadal. He's so at the top of his game, and the game that there are literally millions of people around the world also playing in, that, I think I kind of realized that there's a difference between achieving all of those dreams and achieving a career in the industry you want to work in. And I think I realized that I can be a musician, a working musician. I can get up every day, go to a studio and create music. That's what I wanted to do. Yes, of course I want to write Hit Me Baby One More Time for Britney Spears and become a multimillionaire and never have to worry about it, and all the success that goes with that. Obviously, you want to aim high, but also you can write a song for, your local GAA club who want a song for Christmas, or, you can do the music for an ad or score a short film for some students. It's all work. It's all working as a professional musician is someone who gets paid to do music. That's all I ever really wanted to be. The radio thing was, I suppose, similar enough, and maybe in the same universe enough, that I never felt like, even when radio completely consumed me as it has done and as it does. And I never, I didn't get the chance to pursue the music with the same, wealth of time and resources that I did before radio. I suppose I felt satisfied that it's still a job that allowed me to be creative and allowed me to not, look, I've written songs and I still, like tomorrow morning I'm going in to mix a song in the morning, and I actually can't wait to go in first thing early. I'll be in before everyone else, sitting in the studio. I'm going to mix a song that we're going to play out on the show later on. So it's not that music gave me the exact same career, but it still allowed me to have some creativity, some fun, some music, some art around just talking into a microphone. There's that, and then there's this whole other side of it that I suppose fed that kind of need in me to still be in that universe.
Very, very good. Yeah, it's still close. It wasn't a complete alienation from what your passion was. Yeah, and obviously, look, you've become hugely successful over the last 20 years, and culminating in Dermot and Dave Today FM, and you have like the morning slot. What often interests me, and I think what will interest a lot of people that, particularly young people that are thinking of following a similar path, you have that on-air time of 3 hours. But can you describe your typical day, though, and the amount of work maybe, and what goes into those 3 hours that people actually hear? Yeah,
sure. That's a great question, actually. So practical, boring stuff. My alarm goes off at 5:41 a.m. I don't know why I picked that exact moment. That's the time I want to wake up at, but I'm usually awake just before it, and I kind of, it goes beep, and I turn it straight off before it even makes a noise and wakes my wife. But yeah, I kind of, and I hate to be that guy, but I kind of hop out of bed and I jump in the shower and just get in the car and drive to work. I park up in the car park and I meditate for about 15 or 20 minutes. Just put the seat back and just do a little body scan. It just really works for me. I started that in about 2014, 2015, so I've been doing it now for, God, must be 5, 6, 7 years now. And I just find it's really useful in what I tend to find with it is meditation allows me a moment of perspective. And what I mean by that is that when something happens and someone asks you a question, or you're in an argument, or you're in a heated discussion, or in a normal meeting that isn't any of those things, the meditation, I find, just gives me a second to pause and consider what it is I'm going to say, or how the other person is reacting, and just kind of think about it from their point of view for a second. It's like I zoom out, like I'm sitting in the room, and then I zoom out of the room and I see the room as a whole, and I go, that person is coming from this point of view, and their priority is this, and that person is this, and I feel this way. So if I say that, that's going to cause a lot of hassle, whereas I can word it this way, make the same point, but be slightly cleverer about it, whatever. So I find meditation is great for that kind of thing for me. It just gives me the mental power to just pause for a second, consider all options, and then, have that conversation. And that works great on the radio too, because, you can find yourself in tricky conversations on radio as well. And you need to have that ability to just go, hang on a second, what am I going to say here? Or how am I going to react to this? Whatever. So the meditation helps me greatly. Then I'm into work, into the office, cup of tea. First things first, you got to get yourself settled with a cup of tea. And then I go straight into the studio. And the reason I do that is because I run the desk in the studio. So again, what people may or may not realize is it's not just the two of us, myself and Dermot, sitting on microphones. There's a whole play-out system, and the microphones have the traditional, what people will know as a mixing desk, where the faders go up and down and they give the microphones on and off and all that kind of stuff. But also there are phone lines, Skype lines, newsrooms, sports desks, CD players, computers, effects returns. There's all these different, there's like, I don't know how many faders there are on our desk, maybe 24 faders. So you need to be on top of all of those and have them ready to go. And it's like, sometimes I draw the analogy, because if you came into the studio and you saw, like, I have 4 computer screens, all of these faders, headphone sockets, CD players, effects units, communication between us and the new studio and the other studios. There's a whole racks and racks of gear beside me. A lot of people would be intimidated and go, oh my God, there's so much. And there is, But it's a lot like driving a car or riding a bike in the sense that when you're doing it, you tend not, it's instinctual and you tend not to think about it too much. You just know what it is you need to do. Now, some people are built for that. I come from a recording background. Mixing desks are fine for me. You know, when Dermot and I began our careers, he was the one who had the radio experience. So he ran the desk for the first, I can't remember how long, 6 months, a year, whatever it would have been. And then we quickly realized that our personality types actually suited better to flip that. Let me run the desk and anchor the show and do the jockeying in and out, and let Dermot be free and creative and funny and all those things that he is. So again, his side of the desk looks very different to mine. I mean, he can get away if he wants with a microphone and nothing else. Now, he has a computer as well and a screen, but he doesn't necessarily need any of those things. He just needs a microphone, and it's like, let's do this. And we play to each other's strengths that way. But certainly, I go in early in order to go through the log of the show, to look at the order in which things are happening, make sure everything's right. Obviously, you know, if you listen to our show, you'll know that we obviously have news and ads and all those things that are part of the station, but we also have songs, and then we also have music beds and intros and things that we use for the show. So I need to go in and go, what day is today? Today is Wednesday. I need to have this, and I need to have Say Stuff That Suits the Music. I need to have my hotkey bank, which are these 25 buttons you can press and trigger audio. I need to have all my pieces of audio there for Dermot to do Say Stuff That Suits the Music in a little while. Make sure they're all right. You know, so you go through everything. So that will take me, it could take anything from 10 minutes to half an hour to make sure that you are set up perfectly for the day. Then, if I have anything personal that I'm doing, so for example, 3 days a week I do Dave's World, which is literally a link where it's my job to bring something to the table. And that requires a lot of prep. So I'm constantly, when I'm at home and when I'm anywhere, if I see anything interesting, I email it to myself. So I get up on those mornings, I come in and I look at what I've emailed myself and go, ooh, that's actually interesting. And then that ties in with this and whatever. And then so there's a good bit of prep. That could be another half an hour of prep of whatever it is that I'm going to do in Dave's World. Or it could be another, the first link of the show is usually free to kind of see what the big story of the day is. But maybe we've decided in the previous day that, oh no, Dave, you're going to tell the story about, you know, what you're getting for Christmas, whatever. And I need to go through that in my head and go, okay, how do I want to approach this? Do I want any audio to, you know, add to the link? If so, I need to go and source the audio, edit it down, make sure it's ready to rock or whatever. So there's a lot of that kind of projecting into the show in the future that's happening in an hour and a half, and then seeing what it is I might need to make that the best version of the show that it is from my point of view. Then come 8 o'clock or so, we'll have a team meeting where we have there's myself and Dermot, and then three people. There's Maria, our producer, and then there's Emer and Cahill, who are broadcast assistants who work on the show. And the three of them are so brilliant. Like, literally, the Dermot and Dave show could not happen without these three people. They are just immense forces of nature who just make it's that whole thing of the duck on the top of the water. Dermot and I look like we know it, but like the work that goes on underneath the water to make it all happen is just phenomenal, and they do a lot of that. So we would have a meeting where we would, if you listen to our show again, you'll know there are benchmarks. And what we mean by benchmarks is there are things that happen every day. There are things that happen on the same day every week. And then there are, you know, free things that are, for that specific day, this is happening. So we would look at maybe 9 major pieces of content over 3 hours. So what I mean by that is that would be, you know, that could be the story of the day. That could be a big interview. That could be a competition. That could be a piece of comedy. That could be a discussion about something. So we need 9 of those every single day. And you can't not have them, because then you've no show, you know. So what we would do is we would go through what we've discussed, what the guys have planned for the weeks before and the days before and yesterday. They say, okay, your 9:30 today is with a guy who did X, and he's going to talk about this, and this is why we're talking about it. And they will explain why the guest is on, which is great for us, because what that does is that allows us the chance to when I say question the reason for the guest, I don't mean question the reason for the guest as in we might say no to the guest. What I mean is question it in that it makes us give it a relevance to our audience, but we can have that discussion off air before we bring it to the audience. And when we bring it to the audience, then we're well versed in why this would be important to the target audience that we're aiming our show at. And like I said, the first link of the show is usually left wide open from the previous day's planning or the week's planning to say, well, overnight, during the day, this morning, what are the big stories? And the team are amazing. They'll have 3 or 4 each, and Dermot and I might have something in our lives or something that we've seen. Oh no, we should definitely talk about this or that, whatever. And we discuss it as a team. Everyone's equal. And we pick a thing and we go, we call it our 10 past 9. So that's our first link of the show. That's what we're going to do at 10 past 9. And that will last between 7 and 12 minutes, depending on what it is. And then we're going to move on to the next thing. So that's the kind of pre-show prep. Then at 8:45, I run out and get my porridge, eat it, do a wee, and then go in and sit down for 3 hours of radio. But that's the kind of prep level that goes in. Then after the 3 hours are done, you need to do certain other kind of homework things, I suppose. So, for example, you need to record a promo, and a promo is a piece of audio that advertises your show outside of your show. So every day we record what's called a post-show promo, which is a promo that advertises the best thing we did on the show that day. Now, that could be the funniest thing, could be the saddest thing, could be the most serious thing, could be the most lighthearted thing, whatever it is. You just pick it out and go, the best thing was this. And usually our producers, they know what we're doing. They go, look, it has to be the moment where Dermot said whatever, or the bit where the guest said this, or whatever it is. So we record a little bit that goes into and out of that. So it'll be a clip from the show, but it needs an intro and an outro and again, a relevance and an explainer. You'll do that, and then you'll do what's called a pre-show promo, which is the following morning when Today FM is happening, the Ian Dempsey Breakfast Show and Paula on Early Breakfast. They will play your promo, but instead of it being the one from highlighting what happened yesterday, it'll be what's coming up this morning. So you might pick 3 things on the show. You might say, like this week, we're so lucky we were able to say, oh my God, on the show we have the entire cast of The Matrix, or we have the cast of, Spider-Man, or we have whatever. We did an hour of Michael Bublé. We've had an amazing guest recently. So you say, that's coming up. Yeah. You pick a competition and go, you can also win yourself, €1,000 worth of whatever. And then the third one, maybe you pick some of the funny bits you're going to do and go, and we'll have a laugh with whatever it is. So you kind of just send that out there. So that's the kind of homework stuff you need to do in terms of the rest of the day promoting your show. And then we do pre-recorded interviews, and I'm sure people may or may not know that we do that. I mean, but not every interview you hear on our show is live. The reason for that is that some people just aren't available to do an interview at a certain time. Like you and I are getting together now, it's the evening time. Sometimes we talk to people who live in different parts of the world. And so if I'm interviewing, like we did, Keanu Reeves, Carrie-Anne Moss, Jada Pinkett Smith, Priyanka Chopra Jonas, Neil Patrick Harris, Jonathan Groff, all the cast of Matrix, they live in LA. So we have to do that at 8 o'clock at night, record it, and then put it together and put it out whenever we put it out, the next day or the day after, whatever it is. But it goes out between those hours. So after the show, sometimes between 12 and 1, you would pre-record other things, other bits of the show. Like I said, I'm going to mix a song tomorrow morning, but we had to write and record that song today after the show between 12 and 1. The reason it's 12 and 1 is because 1 o'clock is an hour before Fergal Darcy uses our studio, so he needs to get in and prep his show. So we need to get out before he can do that. So that's your day. Yeah. Come 1 o'clock, then you have a more informal kind of meeting where you're sitting around at our desks in the office chatting about this and that. But we try and get out as early as possible. Obviously, for the production team, there's a bit more work involved in terms of the day-to-day stuff and the putting together the podcast. For example, we heard the other day, and this will terrify podcast makers, but the Dermot and Dave podcast, which is just the bits of the show that we not repurpose, but we take the bits of the show and put them out as their individual bits. In the 11 months of 2021, we've had 3 million podcast listens. We just got an email about that yesterday. I nearly fell down. That's phenomenal, isn't it? So that's nothing to do with the FM radio. It's nothing to do with the radio when you listen to it live. That is other people at another time of the day going in and going, oh, I want to hear Dave's bad jokes, or I want to hear the interview the guys did with Mike TV from Willy Wonka, and they hit play, and we've had 3 million of them so far this year, which is just phenomenal. But they need to be put together.
That's incredible.
Yeah, they need to be plugged into an RSS feed. They need to be uploaded so that people can actually listen to them. And so there's a lot of background work in that stuff that has to happen. And if it doesn't happen, we're 3 million listens down if our team doesn't do it. So they would be around a little bit longer than Dermot and myself. Like, we would leave, and they're so understanding, and the station is so understanding that, like, you know, the 3 hours for us, the two of us, and the hour afterwards of record, like, that is a draining 4 hours. And I know some people laugh and go, sure, you're walking out the office at 1:30 in the afternoon. And yeah, you're right. We are. And I'm home by 2:30 or whatever. I might have something to do, or I'm home by 3:00, you know, at the same time as the kids are getting home from school. But I did get up at 5:41 a.m. You know, I did, like, literally empty my creative reserves for 4 hours, more,
Intense.
5, 6 hours, whatever it is. Exactly. It's intense and it's draining, and it's so satisfying, and I couldn't love it any more than I do. But it absolutely sucks you out. You know, it's not like doing. I've worked in lots of different jobs, and it's not like doing 3 hours or 5 hours or 6 hours of another job. It's that thing of constantly being on. You know, like the red light is on, and it's now or never. It's live. You don't get a second chance to, you know, to apologize and go again. This is just happening. So that can be quite, you know, again, not being negative about it at all, but it is genuinely a draining experience. So finishing at 1:30 or 2:00 and then heading out is actually, it's kind of important, you know.
Yeah, no, and you can see the passion you have for it. And I think you've answered one of the follow-up questions I had. I was going to ask you what probably is one of the biggest challenges of working in radio. But maybe first of all, what aspect of it, or is there one aspect that you most enjoy?
Yes. I think the thing I most enjoy is the relationship between me and Dermot. And I cannot explain how much I do not take this for granted. And what I mean by this is, like, I never knew Dermot. I'd never met him in my life. He's 2 years older than me. He's from Limerick. We were both in Trinity at the same time, but I was in first year, he was in third year. Like, I never met him. We'd no circles. Like, people sometimes think we've been friends forever. But I now get to go to work every day with my best friend. And it's insane that you can do that as a job, right? So we've worked together, as I said, like, it'll be 20 years in 2022. We're already into our 20th year. And I genuinely have never had an argument with a guy. Like, I've had an argument with my wife, who's my best friend. I've had an argument with my best friends, who are the lads I was in school with and college with and whatever. Like, you have arguments with people. We've literally never said a bad word to each other. And I know this sounds ludicrous, but the relationship we have on air is our relationship. We're literally two lads having a chat, going, this is the crack. But I suppose from a professional point of view, to have the trust that we have with each other, to know that at all times our priority is to do the best show possible, and to do that by supporting each other. Like, so understanding how we both will deal with something, will react to something, the way we will tennis ball an interview. If you ever listen to our show, if you hear us doing an interview, just forget the interview content for a second. Just listen to the way we do the interview in terms of the practicality of it. 9 times out of 10, Dermot will intro the guest. That's just the way we've done it over the years. I'll come off the back of the song. I'll do all the DJ anchoring stuff, whatever, and Dermot will intro the guest. We'll ask the first question. And then I'll ask either a follow-on question from Dermot's question, or I'll ask my own question. Then Dermot will either ask a follow-on question from mine, or I might enhance my question a little bit with another little mini question, whatever. Then it's Dermot's turn to ask a bigger question. And if you see this, it's not that it's a simple thing of, okay, Dermot, Dave. It's not that, but it's an organic kind of, I suppose, structure that is, it's probably going to be Dermot next. But if I have something that I go think, the guest has just said something there that I really want to jump on, there's a quick silent look to Dermot, and he knows, okay, Dave's going to ask a further question, you know. And if it was in any way a kind of competitive relationship, or in any way a kind of antagonistic relationship, it would be much more rigid. It would be, you asked a question, so now it's my turn. You know, there's none of that.
Yeah.
it is absolutely collaborative. It is absolutely full of respect. And I cannot tell you how important and how valuable that is to the success of this radio show over 20 years and the different kind of iterations we've had of the show. It boils down ultimately to our relationship, which to me is the most valuable thing. So that is absolutely the number one thing. And I mean, if you look across the world at radio shows and TV partnerships, whatever, there are so few that last as duos. It just doesn't happen. And to be 20 years into a career and to have worked together literally every single day for 20 years is just, it's balubus. You know, that just doesn't happen. And as I said, I genuinely never get blasé about that, and I hope I never do, because it's literally the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me is to find someone with whom I can have this personal, professional relationship that is, as I said, full of all of the ingredients that make up how we deal with each other. It's just priceless. It genuinely is.
Yeah, the bedrock really of the success that you guys have had, and it kind of resonates with me as well when you talk about that. And I've had other guests on the podcast who talk about relationship management in teams and things like that, and respect. But everyone always says it. The best work is always done when you find those relationships with people, that it just works. Totally. And obviously you guys were lucky enough that it was day one. It just clicked and it was successful. Yeah,
it was. But don't forget as well, our producer Maria has been with us since 2005. Like that's also that's 16 years. Like, and the only reason that she started with us in 2005 and not 2002 is because she was still in school in 2002. Like, you know, she's only a young one. So we literally, you know, again, we kind of ran a series of I suppose producer auditions back in 2005, and Maria just stood out. But our bosses were like, she's a kid, she doesn't know anything about radio. And we were like, it doesn't matter, we know her personality, we know she's going to be great. And she's literally one of the world-class producers in Ireland. She's just phenomenal. And our team has changed. Like, it was always Dermot, Dave and Maria in 98 FM. We were there for 12 years. Well, I suppose Dermot and I were there for 12 years, but Maria was there for whatever it would have been, 9 years with us. There was just the three of us. Now, there were other people who flitted around a little bit, who worked on maybe a few shows, and ours as well. But really, as a core team, it was the three of us. When we came to Today FM, that got upped by one person. Then that got up to two people when we started the 9 to 12 shift that we're on now, because it's just a huge content-heavy show. We needed more bodies. But even those people around Maria have changed. And Sean Reedy, who was with us, only left us about just over a year ago, and Cahill only joined a year ago. So we're kind of, the Dermot, Dave, Maria thing is still, you know, one of the main kind of the three legs of the stool, if you know what I mean. Emer's been there now for years. She's so brilliant, and Cahill has joined us, and we couldn't have got looked out anymore with Cahill. He's just so perfect. And again, when we did auditions and interviews for the person to step into Sean's shoes, it was so obvious to us. The other people were so brilliant, but straight away we all looked at each other and went, it's Cahill. Like, his personality will fit with us so well. Not that the others didn't have the right skills. Of course they did. They all did. But we just look at all the pieces together and go, Cahill's the guy who's going to come in here and going to absolutely work with us as humans. And that is the bedrock then to do all the work, you know? Yeah, fantastic. And if you were to give advice, Dave, to, again, someone who wants to be the next Dave or part of the next Dermot and Dave, if there ever could be, what kind of and I'm assuming, right, it's a very tough business to get into, and to get to that level of success, you know, very few people are going to get there. But what kind of skill set would you say young people should have or should work on? And any advice on what should they start doing now if that's where they want to get to? Yeah, well, Brendan, you're doing it, because you guys who are alive right now have no idea how lucky you are. When I started in radio and I got to know Robbie Fogarty and Barry Dunn and Brian McCall and Dec Pearce and all these people, they ran pirate radio stations out of sheds for the chance to broadcast to the 4 gardens around them, and then when they got a bigger transponder, to the 4 estates around where they lived. Their dream was to talk to people and play tunes. Like, now you're doing it, Brendan, and I know it's a joke that everyone's got a podcast, but think about it. You literally have your own radio show. You have the opportunity to be a radio host for however much time you want to put into it. And what I mean when I say that, it's not that you need to create something that's going to sound like... Podcasts are different than the radio. They are. But what can you do in a podcast that will prepare you for the radio? First of all, you should pick a podcast about a topic that you are passionate about, not something you think will transfer to radio. Because I'm telling you now, your bosses are paid exorbitant amounts of money in radio to come up with strategy and to come up with content direction and to tell you what it is they want you to do. So don't worry about that. If you, like, Brendan, you obviously care about careers. You care about career paths and learning from people. That's what you care about. Other people might do a podcast on Marvel movies, or they might do a podcast on knitting, or they might do a podcast on the train timetable out of Houston Station in 1947. It doesn't matter. What matters is do something that you're passionate about, because what will happen is if you do a weekly podcast for 1 year, you will have 52 shows, and out of those 52 shows, you will have 52 chances to improve, and you have 52 chances to learn from what you've done. Now, this is if you want to be a presenter or a producer. You want to work in the production and presentation side of radio, because while you might think your podcast is helping you be a better presenter, and it is, but you also have to come up with the content. You have to source a guest. If you have a guest podcast, maybe you don't. Or maybe you have to, if you're sitting down with your mates and you want to talk about fantasy football, you have to decide, well, what are we talking about this week, lads? We can't just turn the microphones on and hit record because it's going to be crap. Okay, we need to talk about who's playing their triple captain this week. That'll be the first section. Then we need to talk about how Mo Salah didn't score at the weekend and everyone's annoyed. Then we need to talk about, you know, who's got a triple game week coming up over Christmas. You know, so you plan it out. That's radio production. That is it right there. You're deciding what to talk about, in what order, and how to do it. So if again, I never wanted to work in radio, but if those guys who always wanted to work in radio had the chance to do a podcast, imagine, like, they, as I said, they had to literally go to the shed and broadcast to the people who could hear them. Like, now you have the chance, your podcast, okay, and I'm not saying it needs to be heard by millions of people. It doesn't. It just needs to be something that you understand is a show, and I mean show in the entertainment world point of view, like put on the makeup.
Yeah.
You turn the red light on, you hit record in this interview, Brendan, and we have to be on. This is our, it's a time now for us, for you to ask the right questions, me to give you answers, but like your job as a host is to listen to me, to react to what I'm saying, and ask me the next leading question to get me to talk and blabber on for another 20 minutes about whatever. But that's your job, and the more you do this, the better you're going to get at it. And so if you wanted to be working on radio, you know, if you did, as I said, a year's worth of podcasts, 2 years worth of podcasts, not only do you have all of that experience now, 2 years later, but you also can make a killer demo. Now, as I said, the content is irrelevant. The guy who hires people in a radio station doesn't care if you're talking about the Kardashians or stamps or, you know, Sasquatchan ice hockey. He doesn't care. He's listening for passion. He's listening for enthusiasm. He's listening for an ability to create a conversation around whatever the topic is. And when you get into that radio station, he'll go, okay, you don't need to talk about stamps, but you do need to talk about, you know, this sport or that celebrity topic or this current affairs or whatever it is. And you now have the ability to take any topic and apply the same skills you developed talking about stamps about this. And so I would say to anyone who wants to work in that side of radio, the production and presenting side, is do a podcast, but treat it like a job. You can't miss an upload. I mean, obviously, if something terrible happens, you can miss something. But what I mean is, but you go into it like a job. You go into it going, every Thursday at 8 o'clock, I'm hitting upload. Every Thursday. Whether one person has to do it, or 1,000 people, or 1,000,000 people, doesn't matter. You hit upload on a Thursday, because that gives you the radio discipline of, my show has to happen every day, every week, every weekend, whatever show you get on radio. And it gives you deadlines, it gives you pressure, it gives you the opportunity to fail, which is so important. And then by the time you end up hopefully getting an opportunity in a radio station, you've got so many skills already from podcasting that you can transfer to radio that it's just absolutely priceless.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Brilliant advice. And I'll certainly take some of that advice on board as well.
Do.
It's fantastic. Thank you. And you mentioned there about just thinking about radio when you were saying it. And for years, people, and everyone has a podcast now, as you said, and there's loads of them out there. And media's changed quite a lot, hasn't it? And you'll certainly have seen it, as you mentioned, when you first came in and what people were doing. How do you see the future of radio changing in any material way over the next decade? And should young people thinking of getting into it have that on their radar, that it might be a different thing, different content? How do you see it going? Or do you think it'll be pretty much as it is today, 10 years from now, for example?
Yeah, I think predicting 10 years into the future is a dangerous thing for anybody, particularly the way things move. And we all know that Moore's law of technology, where, you know, every 18 months or so, we double our capacity in a technological sense.
Yeah.
So, look, things will absolutely change. But I suppose in reality, you're working in audio. And working in audio I think, is going to live, is going to be around. I mean, I remember when would it have been 2012, a technological startup approached me, and they said, look, we'd love you to come on board as an advisor. We have an idea for an audio social network. And it was like, wow, audio social network, this is a genius idea. So instead of writing a tweet, you simply hold a button down or press a button on your phone and you record a tweet. Simple as that. Who doesn't like to communicate with the voice? It's so much easier, etc., etc. The reason that didn't succeed was not because it was a bad idea. It was not because it didn't have the right people at it. It was not because it didn't have funding. It had all of those things. The world changed and video happened. And what I mean by video was always there. YouTube was 2005. Video was around. But what happened was your phone became your communication device, and it was video and audio. So the idea of an audio podcast or an audio social network was simply outgrown by the time an audio social network existed. The world had gone to video. So, you know, it would be naive to think that, yeah, sure, you know, FM radio will be the same in 10 years as it is now. Of course it won't. But I mean, look at where I work now. Our parent company, Communicore in Ireland, was bought out by a German company called Bauer, and Bauer now own us. Bauer are called Bauer Media Audio Ireland. They're not called Bauer Radio. It's BMAI. It's Bauer Media Audio Ireland. And what that means is that the radio industry has seen the fact that we are now an audio. In fact, I'd even go further to that. Like I mentioned, podcast numbers. Our show has done 3 million podcast listens outside of the normal broadcast in 2021 so far. I don't know the numbers yet, but I guarantee you our video hits are something astronomical as well. And the videos aren't us going into a separate studio to record a video or recording stuff outside of the studio. We have cameras pointing at us for the 3 hours, and they record for 3 hours. And afterwards, our team can decide, oh, do you remember that bit when we were talking to that guy and he said that thing? Let's cut that bit where Dave asked the question, the guy gives the answer, Dermot reacted to it, and put that out as a video. So that content now means that we are no longer an FM radio station you listen to in your car or on a radio in your kitchen. We're on smart speakers. We're on your phone. We're on YouTube. We're on Instagram. We are now we're now a media company. We're the biggest media company in Ireland, as far as I know, Today FM. But it's not just about the radio. So yes, in 10 years, will it change? Of course it will. Of course it will. I still think the core skill set will apply, which is the ability to talk passionately, to be professional, to deliver the information you need to deliver, to have fun and to enjoy what you're doing. I think all of those characteristics will apply to whatever the landscape is. So I think the skills that you can develop now, if you're interested in doing this in the future, it's not that you absolutely go, well, I'm going to try and predict the future and develop a different skill set. The communication skill set is going to be the same. The platform on which it might happen, maybe it'll be different, and we'll all be on WAPU. Who knows what that is? But ultimately, it will still come down to content. It'll still come down to delivery. It'll still come down to passion, and all of those things are timeless. And I think if you can develop those skills in whatever format you do, because I talked about podcasting earlier on. I probably should have clarified that. I don't mean you specifically need to do podcasting. I suppose what I mean is you specifically need to be broadcasting. So you could be on Twitch. You could be playing games, but why are the biggest people on Twitch the biggest people? Because they're so entertaining. You could come up with a TikTok strategy that you could, like, there's a guy, I'm sure people know him, who takes a little snippet of a TikTok out of context, and then you think it's going to be that video, but then it's him, usually in his car, answering a question that's been posed in the previous TikTok and then giving you a fact. Like, literally, this guy has carved out a niche for himself, and because of his TikTok numbers, I'm sure he's making a living out of TikTok. He doesn't need to worry about anything else. He's not trying to get on radio, for example, but could you conceivably carve out a career on a social network that could transfer to radio? Of course, because the skill sets are communication, passion, fun, enjoyment, like all the things people want in a social network that might be 15 seconds long or 20 seconds, or whatever. They still want those things in a longer form thing of, be it a podcast, be it a TV show, be it a radio show. There are still the same core values and requirements to be successful across any of those things, I think.
Yeah. And shifting gears, Dave, I want to talk a little bit about social media and the importance of social media from your career perspective, for example, and how that's evolved over the years for you, and maybe how you use it, how you manage it, the benefits of it, but also maybe some of the negative sides to it, and advice you could give around how you should use that.
Yeah, I have to say I've been a really early adopter of things. So, and I have Graham Linehan to thank for this, actually. Graham Linehan is the co-writer of Father Ted. And he had a blog back in the day. People used to have blogs. Again, around 2005, 6, 7. And look, I'm a huge Father Ted nerd. And so being able to kind of, get the personal insights of the guy who created your favorite TV show was a very exciting thing. It was what the internet was built for, access and all these things. So Graham used to have a blog, was called something like Why That's Delightful, I think it was called. So it was like whythat'sdelightful.blogspot.com or something like that, whatever. And you just log on, and Graham would have written a piece, and people would comment underneath. And obviously, much like a radio show, the same names would show up, and people would have comments, and then Graham would react to a few. And if you got a reaction from Graham to your funny comment, you'd be like, "Oh my God!" Like the guy who made Father Ted said my thing was funny, or whatever. And then at one point he just went, "Lads, I'm going to move to Twitter and stop this blog." And we were all like, "What? This is our favorite thing." And he's like, "No, there's a thing called Twitter, and it's like this, except it's not niche in that people need to know whether it's just everyone's going to be on it, whatever." And I was like, "That sounds fishy," and went Twitter had literally launched. Like it was probably like, I'll tell you how early it was. You did Twitter on your phone via text message. Because I don't know if people remember this. You have to be around in 2007 and have been on social networks in 2007. But the reason Twitter was always limited to 140 characters was because it needed the maximum you could send in a text message back then was 160 characters. And Twitter needed 20 characters to have information to send it to Twitter. So the maximum you could write on Twitter was 140 characters up until like 2 years ago. But that was a hangover from it being just a text message based social network. You would text on your phone. Yeah. And when I say text, I mean like you wanted to write Brendan. So you went 22777733 6 like you didn't write BREND, like that wasn't an option. There was no smartphones. It's 2007.
Yeah.
You had a Nokia or whatever, but you would text it and it would go to Twitter, and then that would be posted up, and then you could log in on your computer absolutely and see it. But there was no Twitter app on your phone. None of this existed. So really early, I got onto it and I got addicted really quickly because I could see the power of it. I was like, this is actually a phenomenal tool. And the way I saw it was an extension of our radio show hours. So at that time, we were on breakfast 6 to 10, or what was I on Drive 4 to 7? I can't remember whichever show I was on. But the way I looked at it was, hang on, I can now communicate with my audience outside of the hours I've got a microphone in front of me. And so that was really powerful to me. And I tried to convince the radio station to get Twitter. They were like, don't know what this is, you're a maniac. I had convinced them about a year previous to make a YouTube channel. We had achieved 1 million YouTube views in a year, and they were like, what is this? Like, this was, they didn't even know what YouTube was when I said it to them. So I said the same on Twitter, and they were like, I don't know. And then I was like, look, it's like YouTube. It'll be, it'll become a thing or whatever. So I adopted that really early, and as I said, I then saw it as a tool to take the idea of the show to the same, so to kind of over deliver to the audience that loved my show, but also to attract a new audience who didn't know my show. And maybe they would never tune into my show, but I could engage with them on social media. So that was definitely the way I began social media, was I immediately saw the opportunity to extend the hours of relevance to my audience and to a new audience, and that I could try and bring some of that new audience to the FM side of things, because ultimately in radio you live and die by your FM ratings, as antiquated as that might be. That's the reality of it. So what I was trying to do was, this is almost like an advertising platform for me, that I can go, well, if you like me on this, you should listen to me on this, and then as the other social networks came along, Facebook had its kind of surge, and Instagram came along and all that, and now TikTok, whatever. So I have used social media initially as a kind of an audience satisfaction and an audience gathering tool. And now the way I see it is, certainly with Instagram, it is now a second job, effectively. It's another stream of work, and I enjoy it, in the same way I enjoy the radio stuff. But that is kind of how I'd view it now, is that, you can just go on and look, read other people's tweets and look at their Facebook. But that's fine. You don't have to. But I think it would be short-sighted to not look at it as a massive opportunity to generate an audience and to deliver for that audience. And, my numbers are not Cristiano Ronaldo numbers, but I still wake up in the morning and look at my Twitter and go, I've got 70,000 people following me on Twitter, same on Instagram. Like, that's just crazy.
It's
and
huge.
So it is. And you, to me, then I can't treat it like something I don't care about, or I can't be, I suppose, inconsistent on it, in the sense that you can't just go like, well, some days I'm really on Twitter and some days I'm really not, like you can't really do it that way. You have to treat it, with respect for what it is, and kind of go, look, I need to work at this in the same way that I work at everything else. And the positive and negative side of things, look, I genuinely believe that you can very carefully curate the atmosphere of your social media. I think you can't stop people being dicks. Like, you just can't.
Yeah.
But if you are prepared to, I'll give you an example. Like, I've been on Twitter since 2007. What's that? 14 years. I think I've blocked 2 people for things that they said in 14 years. I think I've probably gotten like under 100 negative tweets, negative replies,
wow.
literally. And that's not because I'm some kind of superhuman, but it's just because I don't engage with negativity in my life, but also not on social media. So if something is annoying me, I'm not going to vent that on social media. I don't see the point. Like, I will absolutely go on social media and reward. if I get brilliant service somewhere from someone, not because I'm Dave off the radio, because someone who doesn't know I am, like you walk into a place and your kid needs to go to the toilet and they're not supposed to let you use the toilet. And like, I would absolutely go on Twitter and go, thank you so much to this business who did this really cool thing, whatever. But if I go somewhere and get bad service, I'm not going to go on Twitter and go, oh my God, those guys are idiots. I went in there with my kid. They wouldn't let him use the toilet. He peed his pants outside. That's like, why would I be that negative guy if I'm not that negative guy in real life? I'd be disappointed in the business, but it's what advantage is it to me to moan about it? Like, so I've kind of curated my social media to be a place of positivity because that's the kind of person I am. That's the kind of environment I want to exist in. And I remember was it about 5 years ago, maybe more, I absolutely stopped all news feeds. I stopped everything that was giving me news on the internet, on social media. I never really read the newspapers, but I absolutely stopped reading any newspapers that I ever had the chance. And don't forget, I work in radio. I get between 3 and 6 news bulletins a day on my show. I don't mean I'm avoiding the news or burying my head in the sand and going, la, 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 bad news doesn't exist. But I don't believe that news is news. What news is bad news, because that's what makes people listen and what makes people click is, the terrible things in the world. And sure, every now and again, you'll go, and finally, on the news, Bunny Rabbit has been adopted by the royal family and now it gets to live in Buckingham Palace. Like, great, whatever. But I believe that the world is a much more positive and happy and amazing place than the news.
Yeah.
And so I unfollowed every news outlet. I don't ever search out news. I don't have a news app on my phone. And I don't miss out on anything except negativity. Literally, obviously, I know the big news stories of the day. And if I go into my show and the guys in my show team meeting say, the first story of the day is we have the Minister for Health on talking about COVID numbers. Like, obviously, I need to go and read about COVID numbers. I need to make sure I'm versed enough that I can be the voice of my audience talking to Stephen Donnelly or whatever it is. So I'm not saying I'm ignoring that in that situation. But I don't need to know the COVID numbers any other day of the week, other than if I need to do it for my job.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a medical person. I'm not running the country. All it's going to do is make me sad. And I don't need that in my life. I need positivity. And there are wonderful sites and streams you can follow. And my curated Instagram is a perfect example. It's full of it. The Good News Movement. Tanks Good News. And all these is delivered in exactly the same way that news is delivered. It's just good stories about how amazing the world is, how nice people are, how incredible, it could be something as simple as, a kid rings, the way the kids ring bells when they finish their last chemo treatment, when they're cancer-free, whatever, and it could be a little video of a kid doing that, and you go, oh my God, all those doctors and all those medical people made that family have their kid be alive and be healthy, and he rang the bell. Amazing. Next story, school janitors retiring and the school all clubbed together and clapped the person out and gave them, a new car or whatever. Amazing news story. Next one is, for the first time in 75 years, these whales were spotted here and there was 18 of them and we thought they were extinct, whatever. Like that to me is way more useful, powerful, positive things I need in my life than there was a road death in Mayo and some criminal did this and something. Like, why do you need to know that? I have no idea. So you don't.
Yeah.
You absolutely don't need to know any of those things. It's not that you're oblivious to the realities of life, but there's enough out there for you to you'll get it through osmosis. You'll hear other people talking about it. You're not going to be out of the loop of the conversation. You'll just know in your heart of hearts that the rest of the world is actually a lovely place. Yes, there are bad things happening, but most of it's actually pretty damn nice and cool. And I think that kind of attitude is how I've approached social media. So I have tried to be a positive, fun source of content on social media, and that has allowed me to live in a world of social media that feels like that. Of course, there are times I see a tweet from someone I follow and it's negative. Of course, there are times, as I said, that people reply to me and go, you're a dick, you're not funny, you're whatever. And I'm like, fine. But I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to encourage that in my social media world. And I think that's the key thing for me, is you can control how social media is for you. If you listen, some people love an argument, and you want to go on Twitter and put something up that generates, a reaction. I'm just not that dude. I've no interest in it. I just want to go on social media and check out what's the latest gossip about Manchester United transfers, and how many of my favorite guitarists have posted up videos of their playing or whatever. That's what I'm going to do on social media. But some people, I suppose, love the other side of things, and fair play to them. If they like it, go for it. But whatever makes you happy. But you are in control of how your social media looks, I think.
Yeah, it's a superb philosophy, and I agree with it 100%. I think if more people followed that philosophy, the online environment would be infinitely a better place to be. And I wanted to talk to you as well. I'd love to get your views on, like, a hot topic for years now, a good few years, is the whole idea of cancel culture. And obviously, being in the position you're in, and your colleagues, and the world that you're in, how does that affect young kids watching? And do you think it's going to affect their choices of wanting to get into having a public persona? That's kind of one question I have. Are we going to lose out on future people getting in and putting themselves out there? And how has it affected you? And did you change anything, or is it something you worry about at all?
Very good questions. I'll answer the last one first, because I think I can only really speak from experience. But I suppose, again, I've never wanted to put out a version of myself on the radio or on social media or anything that isn't a true reflection of me. Now, I don't mean, look, when you're on, you're performing, you're a heightened version of yourself. So I'm not going to say that, every single time I'm on social media or on the radio, you're getting every single bit of me. Like, I could be sad, but my job is to be a professional, and my show is fun, so that's my job, is to be fun. Or I could be on social media doing, something because I'm either being paid to do it, or I think it's the right thing to do, or whatever it is, and I might not want to do it, or I might, as I said, I might be feeling like I'm tired and I just want to go to bed, or something, I'm watching Man United or whatever. But look, that is part of my job, something I'm going to do. So I think, having not ever wanted to be a fake version of me and to be as authentic as I can, I've never really had to worry about cancel culture, in the sense that I hope that nothing in my real personal life, I don't think I'd be cancelled, because I think I respect humans in a very general sense. I respect humans enough that I'm hopefully never going to offend anybody in a way that would be so detrimental that they would stop being my friend, or that I would be out in public and say a thing that would make people on the street kind of go, whoa, what's that guy just like? So I kind of bring that into my radio show. Now, when I started radio, absolutely, this didn't exist. What you need to do on radio was, you couldn't call, Ireland has the strongest defamation laws in the world. You can't call someone a liar, no matter what. That's one of the biggest things you can't do in Irish radio, and you get told that all the time. You can call them almost anything else, but you cannot call them a liar. And you obviously don't swear very often. So I kind of used to draw the analogy where it would be like, Brendan, if your nana was sitting in the corner of my radio, or my nana was sitting in the corner of my radio studio every day. I want my nana to be proud of me. So I want to have fun, and I want to do my show, but I'm not going to say a bad word because my nana's sitting in the corner. So that was kind of how it began, and how you would control, because, off air, absolutely I use bad words, but I'm not going to do it on air because it's part of my job to not do that. Now look, that's on a local radio station, targeted a certain way. On Today FM, it's a little bit different. If a bad word crept out, I suppose it would depend on the context. It would probably be, you probably wouldn't get a complaint. I mean, if it was like unnecessary, maybe you would. But if it was like, for example, I mean, a silly example is if I tell one of my bad jokes that I do, if the word shite is in the bad joke, it's not going to be a big issue.
Yeah.
You're not going to get a complaint. But if you're just having a conversation with Dermot and you start using F this and, people will be like, whoa, this feels a bit weird. So take that as a kind of a base level of just don't swear on the radio. So you can extrapolate that to 2021. And I think you don't want to say something on the radio, that whether that's a bad word or an offensive term or like, okay, I'll give you a perfect example. If we were talking about a sensitive topic that could be a minefield where I could say the wrong thing, the way I approach those topics is by saying at the start of it that I don't understand this scenario. Be that, so that my perspective is from a white, middle-aged male in a first world country. And as a result of that, I need to learn things. So, for example, Black Lives Matter is something that is now ingrained in our society. I think it's our job as white people, our job as Europeans, our job as humans to learn about the struggles of people of colour. Does that mean that you have all the answers? No, of course not. It's only now becoming a conversation that we can have to try and educate ourselves. Why is it so difficult for people of colour? Why is it so difficult for people who are a different gender, for people who are gender fluid? What do I know about gender fluidity? Very little. But I will happily admit that, as opposed to come out and form an opinion and rant on the radio about something that I know nothing about. I will have somebody on who can educate me, and I will ask them questions that I hope don't offend anybody, but I will absolutely say, the reason I'm asking this question is because I don't know what it means to be transgender, or I don't know what it means to be a gay person or a black person or a woman. Like I have understanding of these topics from being a man in my 40s, but I'm still coming at it from arguably one of the most privileged places in the world, which is white, middle class, first world, European. Like, you know, you have to, if you don't give yourself the credit of your own perspective, then you probably will walk into a conversation and say the wrong thing. But I think if you give yourself the credit going, this is where I'm coming from, you can't you don't need to explain away or hide your upbringing and perspective. And now, if you're using that as an excuse to be an idiot, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You can't just go, well, look,
yeah.
I don't know anything about the struggles of people of colour, so I'm not interested. That's not good enough. You have to be interested because it's the society we live in. And it's a world that we need to improve. But you can absolutely say, I was not aware that this was as big a struggle for you as it now is plain to me that it is. And I'm going to try and bring up my children, for example, in have a much deeper understanding of the struggles of different people all around the world in different scenarios, whatever they may be. You know, whether that's like anything, whether that's from a socioeconomic background or a sexuality background or a race background or a religion background, whatever it is, to bring up my job now is to learn as much as I can and make sure my kids know more than I do by the time they become adults. And I think, so to me, cancel culture, I'm hopeful that it won't ever affect me, because I'm hopeful that I'm open-minded enough and that I'm honest enough to not find myself in a situation where I make a mistake so grave that it could be an option, because I don't want to be that person. And if I do, I hope I also have the kind of wherewithal to hold up my hands and go, like, seriously, absolutely wrong. And if I need to step away or do whatever, that's what I'm going to do. Because I think that's another thing, is often it's the fight back against being cancelled. Whether being cancelled or not being cancelled is right or wrong, that's a whole other conversation. But if you make a mistake, like, you've got to own it. You can't. You know, I think it's so. It perpetuates the difficulties for people. You know, when people don't realize or make the effort to understand or explain or apologize for a mistake. You know, that would go so far to either lessening or uncancelling yourself. Because if you're honest about it and authentic about it, unless you were, as I said, actively doing something wrong or saying something wrong and with knowledge, that's a different conversation.
Yeah, I know that's a great perspective. And anyway, I can't see it ever happening to you anyway, but it is good perspective to hear your thoughts on it. And you mentioned earlier, and I made a note to come back to it, your interviews, right? And you've obviously interviewed, like, as you say, Keanu Reeves, Spider-Man, Casa, all this kind of stuff. It's amazing, like, to have that opportunity to do and meet people. So I have a couple of questions wrapped into one.
Sure.
And I know I'm holding on to you longer than I said. No,
listen, I'm under no time constraints, Brendan. Honestly, look, just keep going. Honestly, for as long as you need to.
Oh, good man. Thank you. So, is there a most memorable interview that you've done that stands out as memorable or the most enjoyable that you've done? And what top tips would you give for conducting a good interview? And I'm asking that for myself, so I can learn from you.
Most memorable interview, like, I think, this might sound a little kind of, oh, you would say that, but honestly, the Keanu Reeveses and the Will Ferrells and the Mel Gibsons and the Sting and the Coldplay and all, I literally, we could go on for the next hour and I could list off the people I've interviewed. Even this year, it's insane. Like, in one day, this day last week, I interviewed 8 members of the cast of The Matrix. So, there was Jessica, Yaya, Priyanka, Jada, Jonathan, Neil, Carrie-Anne, and Keanu, right? So 8 members of The Matrix, some of the biggest actors in the world. Matthew McConaughey, Scarlett Johansson, Tori Kelly, and Reese Witherspoon. So that's 12 celebrities in one day. Denise Van Outen, Kimberly Walsh, and there was someone else. Was it Jason Byrne? And there was one other person on the show. I can't think who it was. So there was another. Anyway, so there were 14 or 15 celebrities in one day I interviewed, right? It was the most insane day of my life. It was absolutely ludicrous. But all of those interviews are very enjoyable and fleeting, and they are, when I say pressured, I don't mean pressured as in I'm going into it breaking it, but I mean pressured as in you have 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, whatever it is, and you need to ask a certain amount of questions. You need to deliver for your audience, and you need to make it a Dermot and Dave interview. You need to make it your style of interview. So you have a lot of moving parts going on, and that can be quite difficult. And thankfully, as I said, he and I know each other so well, we know how to get all of those things into one interview. That's all fine. But genuinely, all of those types of interviews are not as much fun as talking to our listeners. And I don't even know if they're interviews, but like, some of my most memorable conversations on radio are with listeners who made me laugh so hard, or made me cry, or made me just be wowed by something that they did or they talked about or whatever. Like, those things stick in my mind way more than, oh yeah, I interviewed Ryan Reynolds a couple of months back. Forgot about that. Like, I'm not being big-headed about it, but what I mean is, like, that stuff comes and goes, and people are very impressed by celebrities, and I get that. I totally get that. It's amazing, like, that you get access to these people is unreal. But like talking to a guy about his dog who's just got the funniest name in Ireland, or a woman who was trying to tell a story but she couldn't tell a story because she was laughing so much at the story, like, they will live with me until I die. Interviewing Ryan Reynolds, I'm sorry, Ryan Reynolds, as beautiful as you are, it's not going to live with me. It's like, it's just a quick interview to promote his movie, and it was great to sit there and have a chat to him, but that is not going to live with me in the same way that a really interesting or a really fun or a really moving interview is going to do a conversation with. And sometimes, like, we do a thing on the show every day where we have 3 callers on for a game called Asher Look At Isn't That It? You're just trying to guess words in a sentence. But, like, my favorite bits of the show when we kind of go back over the show afterwards and say that was good, this could be better, whatever. My favorite bits are those 3 callers, like, and they could just be like, "What are you doing today?" "Oh, I'm taking my dog to the groomers." "No way, what's your dog's name?" "Oh, what kind of dog?" "Oh, no way, I wanted to do." "Oh, last week it bit the postman." "Oh my god, man!" Like, they are my favorite bits. And then at 11:30 it might be like, yeah, you know, as I said, like Coldplay are on the show, and I go, "Oh yeah, Coldplay. Oh, you forgot about Coldplay. Yeah. Oh, do you remember your man who said the thing about the dog?" Like, that's just the way my brain is wired, you know. So I love those. But look, I think in terms of big names, what I love is I love an opportunity to spend time with a high-profile celebrity, as somebody who's interesting. And what I mean by that is I don't mean hang out with them for days, but sometimes you get the opportunity to have somebody come into your studio. Okay, COVID is a bit different now, but like up until 2020, somebody would come in and their people would have agreed that you'll get them for an hour. And what that means is you get them from, say, 9 to 10 or 10 to 11 or whatever it is. And what it means is you get them when they're off air. And that is so key to brilliant on-air interviews. So if I remember Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg came in for Daddy's Home, and we had them for an hour. And it was phenomenal because we talked as 4 lads sitting around the table talking about what they did in the days they were in Ireland, you know, where they're going next. You know, "Oh, Mark, you've got your own water company," as in bottled water company. You know, things that we weren't going to talk about on air, but the conversations we had off air set their guards down for the conversations on air.
Yeah.
So we're still talking about the movie, we're still talking about Hollywood, still talking about celebrities, but they're now going, "I like this guy," or "I don't like this guy," whatever it is. They're just going, I now know more about, like, I remember Will Ferrell. I just remember being blown away with Will Ferrell. Like, he just asked us about our families, like, almost straight away. He's like, "Are you married? Do you guys have kids?" We're like, yeah. And then at some point in the conversation later on, he goes, "And I know you guys have, was it 7 kids between you?" And we were like, yeah, it is 7 kids. Like, you asked us that 45 minutes ago, but it's got into your head. And so then that predisposes you so much more to those people, that conversation. You get to know them in a way. I remember we had, in 98 FM, we had the stars of, what was it called? Something. It was an Adam Sandler movie. It was all his mates. So it was Adam Sandler, Chris Rock, who's the mall cop guy? Can't remember his name off the top of my head. And David Spade. And basically it was the 4 of them were in the movie together. And they came in and we had them for an hour. And I remember just after them going, being blown away by the fact that this wasn't just wheel them in, 4 minutes, wheel them out. You know, they took the mickey out of us. Like, at one point I had Chris Rock sitting on my back because we were just doing something stupid in a song. Like, you know, this stuff, these are the ones that I will remember because you spend time with people and you get to know them it's still 40 minutes. You're not friends with them. You're not going to walk away with their phone number and go meet them, but you get a different relationship. I had it with Gary Neville. I had it with Russell Brand. There are certain people that they come and they do a longer spot on your show. That means you get to know them a bit better. It breaks down a lot of barriers, and it's really entertaining then to interview them with them knowing you a bit more and you knowing them a bit more. So the 4-minute and the 6-minute and the 10-minute interviews with super celebs that you get on a movie junket are great, but they're literally, it's so difficult to get anything out of that other than, you know, the 5 answers you're going to get and then you move on to the next person or whatever. So the ones where people spend more time,
that's more formulaic.
Yeah, very much so. And it's still your job to try and make it more interesting, and you just got to work harder than anyone else, you know. And we've been like, we've seen it work. Like, I mean, Michael Bublé did an interview with us that we did in September. Yeah, September. And then he did a press interview last week. So this week. And he said, my first interview back was with a couple of Irish guys on the radio. And is there anybody effing better? Is what he said about us. And that was written in print.
Fantastic.
And you're like going, what? Like, but we had him for 40 minutes. And we talked to him about so much stuff. And we walked away in that Alan Partridge way of going, I'm convinced he's my best friend. But like, we genuinely broke down some things. We genuinely, by the end of it, we're walking away, and he was going, I hope your kids do this, and we were hoping, well, I hope your wife is, there were things we were saying that were different than a standard interview. And obviously, when he did a print interview 3 months later, and it was Ireland, he goes, "Oh, Ireland! I remember when my first interview was these Irish guys. Is there anybody effing better than these guys?" And you're like, wow, But you need to make that impression on someone in 40 minutes or 10 minutes or 4 minutes. That's your job. I mean, it doesn't always work. Sometimes people are just closed. They're just, I'm here to do my job. My job is to promote the movie. So I might ask a hilarious question that is going to lead them into this unbelievable thing, and I might just go, "Yep," and you go, "Oh, that's what I'm getting today," and that's fine. They're doing their job too. Some people are great, some people are not great, and it's not, it's not your fault, but you have to try and get the most you can out of those interviews.
Yeah. So is that kind of the first thing you guys do, Dave? And it's a skill I guess you've developed over time. But is it trying to put them at ease?
Yeah.
Or is that's the main kind of skill at the beginning, is it?
Yeah, and look, over Zoom on a movie junket where there are two people on the same camera and they're sitting 15 feet from the camera and 15 feet from a screen where you're on, it's really difficult to put people at ease that way. That's a rarity. But a one-on-one like you and I are doing on Zoom, you can absolutely do that. And a face-to-face, that's where you can really kind of ram it home. But making somebody feel at ease, whoever it is, not just a celebrity. Often we get people on the show, or maybe even on the phone, who are nervous because they're talking on the radio. It's a big deal, and it's not something that a lot of people do all the time. And so again, you need to make them feel at ease doing that. And then you were asking me as well for kind of interview tips, and I know this kind of probably sounds like a pretty obvious thing to say, but genuinely, the number one thing that I think that Dermot and I do really well, and I think is actually quite hard to do, is to listen. And what I mean by that is, you have a plan for an interview. And I don't mean we sat down and we went, you asked this, and then I'll ask this, I mean, going into it instinctively what you want to get out of the interview, because that's your job. But if you don't listen to what the person is saying, and I mean properly listen, and this is again a skill set you develop. It's not something you can't just do this. You have to develop this skill set of having that, let's call it a roadmap in your head of where you think the interview should go, but at the same time, absolutely drill focus on what the person is saying, because an eyebrow move or a throwaway comment might be the most important part of the interview, that if you don't pick up on it because you're thinking, I must ask the question about the time they were in school with Bradley Cooper. If you're thinking that, and you're just going, yeah, you're saying some answer now to the question that answer, yeah. And were you in school with Bradley Cooper? You're not going to do the best. You're going to do a fine interview because you're following your plan. That's absolutely fine. And I'm not saying in every interview there is something that you need to pick up on. Sometimes you'll listen intently and there's nothing. It's just the standard answer you expected. But if you listen properly and are confident enough to react to what the person has said and go off the roadmap, if you have that confidence, then you'll get things that you never thought you'd get. And they will say things that they never thought they'd say. And that's often, to me, is the highest praise that I can get as an interviewer, is that someone finishes up and goes, didn't think you were going to have me talking about that, or I didn't even remember that story until... Then you kind of go, amazing. This is not a bog standard interview that they've done 1,000 times. And sometimes those interviews are fine. The ones that... we had Mike TV from Willy Wonka on the show today, and I don't think we asked him a single original question. Everything was just what people wanted to know. And he's probably answered those questions a million times. But it was, our audience wanted those questions answered. What were the Oompa Loompas like? Could you eat the things in the giant room of sweets? All those. How did you shrink down into the TV? If we didn't ask those questions, we would have been idiots. But that wasn't the interview where you were looking out for, a nuance or a wobble of a lip or something. But oftentimes in an interview, you are looking for those things and going, do you mind if I just ask you what you meant when you said, or you mentioned this was difficult for you when you were talking for 7 minutes about something else. Can we go back to that bit? And you did it there, where you wrote down something you wanted to come back to. That means you were listening to me, Brendan. You weren't just going, God, this guy talks for ages, which you probably are saying. But you did.
I'm not.
But it's genuinely one of the best skills you can have is to think in that way and go, I want to come back to that. I want to let this person talk. But I definitely want to ask them about that, because that to me sounds more interesting than the roadmap question that I had about, did you go to school with Bradley Cooper? You might just find something more interesting in the interview. And I think that is the most important skill, is having your roadmap, but being able to have the confidence to veer off it if the right thing comes up.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great advice. And it's something I find, as I spoke to you earlier, this is very new to me. And that's one of the things I find difficult, actually, is you have an idea of what I want to ask. And I'm happy to go off, but then I find it difficult to get back to what I was thinking in the first place. But I guess it's over time you build that up, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
You've absolutely nailed it. That's exactly what it is. Like, if this is new to you, then like I said about when we're talking about the podcast earlier on, if you do a year of these and you do one a week, you'll do 52 interviews in a year. Now, you telling me that Brendan 4 interviews in is going to be as good as Brendan 52 interviews in? No, he's not. 52 interview Brendan's going to be way better, because you'll have learned how to come back to what you want to do. The more of these you do, whatever it is in your life, whatever job it is, that thing of hours on the job, that matters, I'm obsessed with guitars. I collect guitars. I play guitars since I was 11 years old. And I stopped putting in hours when I was about 16, 17 maybe. But from 11 to 17, I put in 1,050,000 hours. So I'm as good at the guitar now as I was when I was 17. And I'm quite happy with that. But those 6 years of my teenage years, I went to my bedroom every day, I hit play on my tape, and I figured out how to play the song, and I hit pause, and I practice it and practice it and practice it. And that muscle memory is in there, and that's how good I am at the guitar. I'm fine with that. But they're the years I put the work in. And now if I sit down in front of someone, they might just go, well, you're a great guitar player. And I go, I could be so much better. But I'm quite happy with what I am. But I put the hours in. And the same thing applies to interviewing. The same thing applies to any job you'll ever do. You're only as good as the amount of hours you put in. Like, even if you think about my kids, 2 boys play football, my daughters as well. But the 2 lads are obsessed with soccer. And they just want to be soccer players. And they want to be the best they can be and whatever. And one of the things I keep trying to explain to them is that even if they are, and they're not, but even if they were the best players at their age group in their club, they will have to go to the next level, and the next level, and the next level. And at all of those levels, the natural intrinsic sporting ability that they have is going to be about 30% of what's going to take them to the next level. And the 70% is hard work and repetition and dedication and absolutely sacrificing, whether it's going out. And I had this as a teenager. We had a coach in school who was he was an American guy, but he came from the American college scenario where he taught athletics in American colleges and then ended up in our school in Ireland. And he sat down a bunch of us, maybe about 8 of us, and he said, we were 15, but I think somewhere between 3rd year and 4th year. And he said, you guys all have the potential to be great athletes. But if you want to go drinking, if you want to go smoking, you want to go hanging out with girls, as teenagers do, I'm not interested. I'm not going to coach you. If you come in here hungover, you come in here distracted, I'm not interested. And we were like, harsh, mate. We're just kids. But 3 of us put the head down, did the work. And we became record holders in all of our fields. And the other guys didn't. And
really,
I was nowhere near as talented as some of the other guys who didn't become those record holders. But they didn't put the work in. Like, if I had 20% where they had 40% talent, I had 80% work and they had 40% work. So I had 20% more work than they did. So I was better than them by 16, 17, 18. Whereas 14, 15, they were so much better, faster, stronger than me. But they weren't going to outwork me. And that's the same thing when it comes to whatever career you go into. Like, your natural abilities at being an accountant or a lawyer or a radio presenter or a dog walker, they'll only get you so far. You've got to put the work in. You've got to be dedicated, and you've got to be prepared to sacrifice and go. Like, there are so many nights that I don't want to read an interview brief for tomorrow morning. But if I don't do it, I'm going to do a worse interview. So I snap out of it. I drink a cup of tea and I sit down and I read it, or I watch a movie, a secondary, like obviously you have to watch the movie you're interviewing someone, but I might watch a secondary movie because that person was in that, or the guy who directed the movie is in that, directed that movie, and the way he directed that movie informed how he directed this movie and how he affected this actor. And so you do that work because you want to do the best interview, because you want to do your job the best way you can. And if you don't put those hours in, it doesn't matter how good you are at whatever you start to do, eventually you're going to flatline on that level, and it's only the work that's going to push you up to the next plateau, you know?
Yeah, I know. It's so true. It's so true. And Dave, I always finish the podcast with this question. It's if you could meet your younger self, let's say your 18, 19-year-old Dave, what advice would you give him, or would you, knowing what you know now?
Wow, that is a great question to finish on. I would probably tell him I'd tell him about focus, because, and I think one of my best personality traits is I'm a jack of all trades, right? And what I mean by that is like, I'm very good at a lot of things, and I'm not brilliant at pretty much anything. You know what I mean? So, I have a kind of a natural ear for music and languages and things like that, and I pursue them. Am I fluent in 7 languages? No. But can I speak 7 languages? Yes. You know what I mean? I love DIY. I've learned all about that, and I'm very good. Am I brilliant? Am I an amazing woodworker? No. Am I, a brilliant plasterer? No. But am I good enough to do jobs? Absolutely. Yeah. Same as I said about guitar. I peaked at 17. That's where I'm still at now. But I'm fine with all that.
Yeah.
But I think at 18 or 19, I think I had maybe too many fingers in too many pies. And maybe that's what you need to do at that age. I don't know if my advice would actually be heeded, but I think I would try and tell myself at that age to maybe narrow the focus for now. That there's all the time in the world. Like, when you're 18 and 19, you think when you're 40, you're dead. Like, whatever you're doing when you're 40, you're stuck doing it. Whatever. You're not, especially not now. So I think I would have told myself, look, focus on these 3 things now, and then in 5 years, you can do the other 4 things that you really want to do at the same time. And in 10 years, you do that. And I mean, like, I genuinely fantasize about, my kids being a bit older, me maybe working a bit less, where I can sit down, Brendan, and just learn more languages. It's literally what I want to do with my older years. I just want to speak more languages. I don't need to become fluent in Italian or fluent in Arabic. But do I absolutely want to speak those languages? Yes. And technology will probably figure out an amazing way for me to learn those when I'm in my 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. But like, I look at that period of my life now as a really rich potential where I can learn more things and do more things. And yes, my body will slow down. Yes, my mind will slow down. But I'm not dead at 46. I'm not going to be dead at 66, hopefully, or at 86. Well, like, I'm going to try and continue to be a better, more knowledgeable, like, richer version of myself all of my life. That's definitely what I want to do. And I think at 18 and 19, I was spreading myself so widely because I thought there was no time. And I think there's so much time.
Brilliant. Dave, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I could keep talking to you. And again, as I said at the beginning, it's very kind of you and very generous and so giving to give your time to do this. So thanks a million. And I wish you a very happy Christmas to you and your family. And take care of yourself.
Same to you, Brendan. And honestly, thank you so much for today. I really enjoyed this chat. Like, I've done a lot of these, particularly, I was telling you as well before we started recording. This year, I've done a lot of them. Some of them have been good, some of them have been not so good, but this was genuinely a really interesting interview and a really interesting set of questions, a lot of which I hadn't been asked before. Obviously, some of them, of course, I have, but obviously that happens in interviews, but also you were able to react to those answers I gave and lead us down very interesting paths. So well done. I really enjoyed it, and thanks for having me on, and happy Christmas to you as well.
You're very kind. Thanks a million, Dave. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.